Morning, everyone. So we had our big pre-election budget yesterday. If it was, I mean, as people will have seen, if it was designed to actually help turn the polls around, I don't think it's going to happen. There are a few things worth going over. First of all, just in terms of how the Tories have had to admit that it makes people worse off. Because that's the thing. If you're going to have, we used to budgets, pre-election budgets, Tory budgets. We know that they make things worse year after year, and then in election year they make things a little bit better. In fact, Labour were sharing a clip yesterday of Keir Starmer from 2022. So this was the budget in 2022, where Rishi Sunak was still the Chancellor, Boris Johnson was still the Prime Minister, and Keir Starmer was explaining how this made things worse for ordinary people. And then he said, but in 2024, you'll find room for a small tax cut because it's election year. And it's exactly what happened. And it's no great foresight. It's because what always happens every single time when there's a budget and the government know it's election year, because, I mean, 2017, you could argue they didn't know there'd be election later that year. But every time they know that there's going to be an election that year, they find a way to cut taxes. Then after the election, they put them back up again. And that's what's going to happen here. All the economists are saying, well, these tax cuts aren't affordable. So whoever comes in next is going to have to whack them back up or put them back up in some way. But Jeremy, so there's the two most senior members of the Treasury in terms of MPs. You've got Jeremy Hunt, who's the Chancellor, and you've got Laura Trott, who's the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. And they both had nightmares. Laura Trott more so, because she is a brain donor, basically. But Hunt, when it was being put to him that this is, that actually that his legacy as Chancellor is for tax burdens to go up, that taxes have risen, he basically said, yeah, but I'm trying to get them down. So it's put to him that taxes have been going up under. He's saying he's a low tax chancellor, right? He wants low taxes. It's pointed out to him that the tax burden's gone up while he's been chancellor, just as it went up while Rishi Sunak was chancellor. And Hunt says as a defense, yes, but I want them to come down. Which basically, it's the usual Tory thing, isn't it? It's like, oh no, I'm just incompetent. It's fine. You should carry on giving me a chance. Oh yeah, I'm not malicious. I'm not doing this thing because I'm an arsehole or a liar. It's because I'm incompetent. And then Laura Trott, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, had a couple of nightmares. First of all, she was trying to say this will make people better off. And it had to be pointed out to her, no, that's rich people. It's going to make people on ordinary incomes worse off. So, I mean, the median income is about £32,000. Even if you earn a few thousand more than that, you're still worse off under this budget. And she had to admit that. So first of all, then she looks like she's disingenuous because she should never have. I mean, just, I don't favor politicians like brazenly lying, but it is part of the toolkit. You're supposed to just keep on with your prepared line. No matter what's asked of you, you don't suddenly admit that you were lying. And then when it's put to her that, she has to admit that taxes are going up, then she says, yeah, but not as much as they could have done. And it's like, so you're putting taxes, you're trying to claim that you're putting taxes down, you're putting taxes up, but you're saying that we should still have confidence in you because you could have put them up even more. Really quite remarkable. Say, just re-listen to Starmer's response to the budget. Beyond the words, clean British energy, not a dicky bird about climate on the environment. Well, that is basically what that is. That is that plan. I'll tell you what Keir Starmer did say, though. You must have seen this as well. When to this thing that the UK economy is doing better than sort of some European economies, Keir Starmer said, no, it's doing worse. Because he pointed out that our GDP per capita, which is a far more useful measure of economic growth, our GDP per capita has actually gone down compared to those economies. And he pointed out that it was down that the fact that our economy had grown at all was down to immigration. He says we're if it weren't for immigrants, basically, the economy hasn't grown in the last year anyway, but there would be no growth at all. And the BBC Radio 4, I think it was, were pointing out to Jeremy Hunt, I think this morning, that what was it they said? I've got it up here. They were pointing out that we've had 7 quarters because we had 2 quarters of falling GDP, which is why we're in recession. But we've had 7 quarters of falling GDP per capita, which is, I think, pretty much unprecedented, certainly for modern times. So Radio 4 pointed this out to him and says, hooked on foreign labour, birth rate collapsing, public services creaking, which is quite generous. And he said those are facts. And then Jeremy Hunt apparently said that characterization of the British economy is unworthy of the BBC. But it's like, which characterization is unworthy? Like, we have had 7 quarters of falling GDP per capita. That's true. Hooked on foreign labour is subjective, but it is something the Tories say. That is the Tories' own line. Birth rate collapsing. Again, that's just a fact. Public services creaking is charitable. Public services are not working. Absolutely not working. If you can go, as I say, I know someone who recently, if you can go to A&E with a broken arm, like properly broken, your humerus is in 2 distinct bits, the ends aren't even joining up together, and be told to go home for a week before they can sort it out with some painkillers, that is not working. If you can't actually, if the police can't respond to all reports of crimes, that's the system that's not working. If you've got school buildings falling down, hospitals falling down, that's public services not working. Creaking's generous. But anyway, if 2 quarters are a recession, 7 must be a depression. Yeah, I mean, of course, in terms of the thing, they always just use GDP, not GDP per capita, which is wrong. We should look at GDP per capita. Because you could argue, like, on the one hand, if we focus on GDP per capita, it would just allow the gammons to moan more about immigration. Oh, well, if our immigration was lower, then our GDP per capita would be higher because we'd have fewer people in it. Forgetting, of course, the fact that the only economic growth we've got is due to immigrants. So actually, no, it would actually be much lower. But there we go. Other things that came up. Oh, do we see this one? A junior minister, I've forgotten who it was now, I made a note somewhere. A junior minister actually attacks the budget. A member of the government publicly attacks the budget, which is dead against the rules of ministerial responsibility. You're supposed to toe the line. If you don't want to toe the party line, you become a backbencher. So we've had a junior minister. He was attacking windfall taxes on oil companies, by the way. He's an MP in Scotland. I don't actually understand. Someone must explain this to me. Why are so many people calling this windfall tax a problem for Scotland? Because it's a windfall tax. It doesn't affect any of the investment of these oil companies. And we know that they're mostly invested in Scotland because they're basically harvesting North Sea oil and gas, right? But it doesn't affect the business model. It's not like suddenly ramping up taxes for a business. And then it's like, oh, well, we'd planned to invest this amount of money in the next 10 years, but now we can't because you charge us more tax. No, it's not. It's purely taxes on windfall profits, which are not accounted for in their business model. So your investments are based on the profits you expect to make. You're part of your business model. They're not being touched. So I don't understand that one. But the Scottish Conservatives, as well as the SNP, are pushing that line. Which is, in fact, was it Douglas Ross who'd said he'd vote against it? Really weird. I subscribe to Sam Friedman's Substack, his views on the budget and insightful. I'm not sure. I do note him. I do follow him on Twitter. It's the leader of the Scottish Tories, Douglas Ross, MP for Moray. He's the one I think he said he's voted against it. He's not the one who, I mean, he criticised it as well. But I mean, because he's not a minister. There was a minister who criticised it. I'm going to have to find it now. Wasn't Douglas Ross. It was another Scot, because the Tories do actually embarrassingly have several MPs when Labour only have one. That will be corrected at the next election. Let me find it. Is it this one? No. Nanas. I've put the link down somewhere. I now don't know what I've done with it. Doesn't matter. Oh, I know where I could find it though. I'll go through some other things while we're at it in terms of things that appeared in the budget. Now, I'll tell you what, let's put this one up because this was interesting. So this was part of the budget. It was spotted by Pippa Crerar of The Guardian. So what she noted, so this is what it says in the budget, as part of the budget. These plans will be developed over the coming months ahead of the next spending review. That spending review, which will come after the general election, will put in place a robust and comprehensive strategy for improving public sector productivity, putting these improvements at the heart of departmental settlement. So basically, the budget says there isn't going to be another spending review until after the general election. Now, here's where it gets interesting. So, general election timing. Are we on for a May election? Are we on for an autumn election or some other time? If you think we're on for, it was Andrew Bowie who criticised it. If you think we're on for an autumn election, then you'd have to sort of think to yourself, well, if they're going to have they've announced this budget, right? It's not really been well received. It doesn't do very much. It doesn't help people on ordinary incomes who are people who are struggling. It helps some people on better incomes a little bit more, like the child benefit cap being raised from 50,000 to 60,000. That is helpful to some people. But in terms of people on ordinary incomes, it doesn't help. So surely, if you're going to go for an autumn election, the plan would be to hope that the economy, or that the economic figures improve a bit so that your fiscal headroom looks a bit better in September, then announce a mini budget like Kwasi Kwarteng did, only this one wouldn't crash the gilt market. So announce another budget with more generous sounding tax cuts and then call the election for October. That would surely be the plan. But this statement says there will be no spending review until after the general election. So that means that's not the plan. Now, you could say, okay, they can put what they want in the budget. It could be a lie, right? They can say that there won't be a spending review until after the election, but maybe there will be. Okay, they're just lying, right? Here's where I have a bit of an issue with it. The Tories, particularly recently, have been bending over backwards to try and tell us that there isn't going to be an election in May. Like, even not just backbenchers, even Greg Hans, who's a Tory minister, so he's speaking on behalf of the government, has said there will definitely not be an election in May. Now, Rishi Sunak isn't saying this, bear in mind, the person who decides. But he's getting Tory ministers to say it. So this statement tells us that there's probably going to be a May election, because it doesn't make sense for the government to limp their way through to autumn without at least a mini budget statement. Because if you're going to have your election in like October or something, you'd want another mini budget statement. Otherwise, people will have noticed that this budget is doing them no good come October. They can't do that. Whereas if they had an election in May the 2nd, they don't notice the impact of this budget, because the budget doesn't come into force until next month, which means people don't see it in their pay packets until May, after which the election's held, right? Josh, £5 super chat, thank you very much, says, do I think the non-dom will simply be rebranded as something else with no real change? Well, there isn't a real change anyway. There's a lot of talk. So there's two things that have been reported as being in the budget that were not in the budget. The first is Jeremy Hunt scrapping non-dom status. No, he's not. He's time limiting it. So what he's saying is that non-dom status will still continue to be a thing, but you can only claim it for, I think, 4 years. So he's not scrapping it. He's just time limiting it. Remember, the idea of non-dom status, it's for people who live in the country but want to claim they don't. So what he's basically saying is, look, you can live in the country for 4 years, which is a hell of a lot more generous than if you're not rich, whilst claiming you live somewhere else. And, you know, that included, for example, Rishi Sunak's wife before she decided to voluntarily give up that non-dom status. So he's now saying, look, you can't take the piss. You can do it for 4 years and no longer. So it's not scrapping it at all. The second thing that reports are trying to say is Jeremy Hunt is talking about a future where we don't have national insurance at all. It's like, no, he didn't. That's not what he said. What he said was he'd like to move to a position where there are no employee contributions to national insurance. So national insurance would still exist. It's just that it would only be employer contributions, which is a very weird thing for a Tory to say. But it's only a lot of what he's saying. He's only saying it because he knows he's not going to deliver another budget. He might, if they have an autumn election, deliver another budget statement, a mini budget, but there is no more budgets because the election is going to take place at the latest next January. So that unless he wants to start introducing 2 budgets a year, and Labour have said they'd like to, then there is no further budget. There'll just be and all the budget statement is like a mini budget. It's just saying what you're going to announce in the following budget. It doesn't commit you to anything. For normal people, it's 180 days in the tax year. Well, Johnny Cophead, £2 super chat. Thank you. It says, have they stolen any Labour plans in this budget? Well, they're a couple that I know. They're applying windfall taxes to oil and gas companies. And they're only doing that because, first of all, they needed some money for the tax cuts. And secondly, they know it'll put a hole in Labour's spending plans, although I reckon Labour have got a plan B anyway. And then the other one was on non-dom status, but they're not scrapping it. They're time limiting it. But it would still remove non-dom status from some people, long-term residents of the UK. Heard that they could lose 1 million votes if they go long because of the impact on mortgages. So in terms of what happens if they go long, right? These are the problems they know are facing them. First of all, an extra 300,000 Tory voters will die. When you just look at the rates of deaths of elderly people and the age profile of Tory voters, between now and October, about 300,000 Tory voters are just going to die. Then, yes, every month that passes, there's another large number of people who are getting new mortgage repayments. HSBC this week have put their mortgage rates up for their fixed rate mortgages. Their packages have all gone up. So that's still happening. It may be that interest rates do come down at some point later this year, but right now, although the Bank of England interest rates aren't going up, mortgage interest rates, well, for HSBC at least, and others may follow suit, are still going up. Hunt just bought a peerage with 100,000 donations to the party. He didn't donate it to the party. This £100,000 wasn't donated to the party. It was donated over a period of years. He hasn't just done it. It was donated to his local constituency because he's desperate to win his seat. Unfortunately, it's all money that's pissed away now. There'll be no return on it. He'll get no return on it because it's not for the party. It's only for his local constituency. And they've already spent some of it because he's been donating it for a few years. So they've been spending it already. He's probably going to lose his seat. If you look at the polling, tactical, as long as people vote tactically, but for a big name like Jeremy Hunt, of course, there's going to be people voting tactically, aren't there? I think he's gone. And even if he wasn't, even if he's still an MP after the election, because his part, there's 2 problems for him. First of all, he won't be a government. So he doesn't get to use his position as an MP to get any sort of favorable business terms. Did you know he's announced after the budget, because the budget actually favors his business interests. He's a landlord, right? He owns properties. And the budget cut taxes. So what Jeremy Hunt has said is he'll promise not to benefit from the budget himself. So he's going to pay voluntarily extra capital gains tax. I'm not sure I believe that, but that just shows you what he can do with this budget. And but he can't do that in opposition. And also, Labour are bringing in anti-lobbying rules, so it's not even like he'd be able to do that. Johnny Copperhead, £5 super chat. Thank you. It says a lot of talk about this budgie, but I must point out that other colourful cage birds are available. Well, quite. Budgies are very nice, then. Views on the Speaker attempt to deny division. Oh, do you mean yesterday with the SNP? I mean, that was just all of it. I have no issue with that. At the end of the day, if they wanted to do that, that's up to them. So I didn't really have any strong views on that one. It was just, I didn't even watch it at the time. I just saw it on the live feed. What happened, for those who don't know, the SNP just delayed procedures because they wanted to vote on some aspect of the budget. Obviously, the Tories were going to vote for it. It just used up an extra 15 minutes. That's all. That's their right to do it. That's fine. Did anyone notice the empty sheets on the government benches when Starmer delivered his indictment to the budget and the government said it all? And government said it all, really. I mean, they often do anyway, because to be fair, I mean, they're not that interested in listening to the leader of the opposition. Imagine it with next year when Labour are delivering a budget, right? So imagine the scenario. Because they always deliver the budget on a Wednesday, which I hate. They should do it on a Tuesday. But obviously the government chooses they're going to do it when it's best for them, which is after PMQs. So they've poured in for PMQs, right? They're there for PMQs. Then there's the budget. So, then they have the budget. And that's a long old process. So they're there. Some of them can't be asked even for that. But some of them have been there for hours. Can you imagine if Kemi Badenoch, as leader of the opposition, stands up? Would you blame a load of Labour MPs for going, yeah, we're not interested in this, and going off to the bar? Because they will have been there for hours. So I don't blame them for that. I don't necessarily think there's anything particular to read into that. Yes, I'm sure they'll have been uncomfortable, not wanting to listen to what Keir Starmer had to say about it. But at the end of the day, they'll have been there for a long time by that point. I think the division did that. The Tories had a great excuse to leave the chamber. I mean, I would have left it anyway. If I've had to sit there listening to PMQs and then the budget, I'm not sure I'd want to stick around to listen to some of what my opponents have got to say about it, if I'm honest. Anyone going to mention Liz Kendall channeling trust yesterday? It wasn't yesterday, but this week, you mean? Whilst talking about UC claimants just like IDS doesn't bode well. No, it does, BUFC, Mike. You're forgetting the difference. I keep trying to say this to people, the difference between rhetoric and policy. Because what you seem to be arguing about is she announced in her speech, her little statement, that Labour are going to massively increase funding for training for young people. Oh, yeah, that's a terrible IDS-style policy, that is. Household income changes is not in the upcoming financial year. It's the threshold going up. Yeah, so, okay, let me come back. Let me come to this then, because I did a little video on my own channel yesterday. People said, oh, no, you've got the child benefit stuff wrong. You've got the child benefit stuff wrong. No, I ain't got it wrong. I did actually say it is possible, because I was just listening or watching the live feed on the budget. So it was possible I could get something wrong. I knew I didn't have this wrong. I'll read it out to you. So here's the situation as I described it. So child benefit at the moment, because this hasn't come into effect yet. Child benefit at the moment, if you only get it, well, you don't get it at all if both parents are earning over £50,000 a year, basically. If at least one parent is earning below that, then you can claim at least some of it. Although there is an upper cap of like 80,000, I think, something like that. But anyway, the point is, if both parents are earning over £50,000 a year, they don't get anything. That cap has now been raised to 60,000. Now, in theory, I don't mind it because it hasn't moved for a long time. It's effectively the threshold has gone down with inflation. I don't, in theory, mind it going up and keeping pace with inflation. That being said, is it really the priority at this point to give more money to people whose household income is over £100,000 and might be a lot over 100, might be up to £120,000, right? Somewhere between 100 and 120,000 pounds. Katrina say you don't get it if one parent is earning more than 50,000. No, you do. I've checked the rules. The rules say one parent gets the child benefit and you nominate the parent. Now, there can be a reduction in it, but you still get child benefit as long as one parent is not earning over 50,000 because you nominate the parent that receives it. Right. But anyway, let me just read what it actually says in the budget here. So it says, to support working parents, Spring Budget 2023 announced a significant expansion of childcare support in England by providing 30 hours a week of free childcare to eligible working parents. Those eligible working parents are almost nobody because they haven't got the money for it or the staff. So it's absolute crap. Spring Budget 2024 announces plans to end the unfairness for single earner families in the child benefit system by administering the high income child benefit charge on a household rather than individual basis. But by April 2026, and the government will consult in due course. So what they're saying is they expect this change to come in place for 2026, not now, 2 years' time when they're not in power and it's not up to them. And it says they will benefit. So they're not even committing to it. They're saying subject to a consultation. So if they did win the election, I will bet you they would not bring this change in. But anyway. When does it say the single earner to household will change? They don't say it at all. They say they expect it to change in April 2026, in 2 years' time. But they don't even promise it will change. They just say they think it will change because the actual wording is administering the high income child benefit charge on a household rather than individual basis by April 2026, and the government will consult in due course. So that means it hasn't even. So if what it means is next year they might do a consultation. That consultation might say, oh, yeah, you can't afford this, or it's not necessary, or something like that, which they go, oh, all right, then we won't do it then. So there's no promise to do it, and there's no commitment, and they can't commit to do it because they're talking about something taking place in 2 years' time. So that will be for the next government, not then. Money saving expert man, that'd be Martin Lewis, I think you mean. Yeah, he did say he was quite happy with that announcement, but I would just point out that this thing about the 2026, which it's another trap for Labour. It's another way to basically, in 2 years' time, if Labour don't do it, to say, well, we were going to do this. And Labour probably will do it, in all honesty, because single mothers they're going to be the main beneficiary of this. They are sort of their target. But at the same time, yeah, it's absolutely. If anyone in any budget promises or suggests that they're promising to do a thing after the election, they're basically just laying a trap for their opponents. But anyway, anything in this budget that's over 6 months isn't happening, to be honest. Well, I mean, the budget is sort of set for a year. Labour, even when they win the election, will still be bound by this budget until they announce another one. And you can't just announce a budget overnight because you've got to. It takes a lot. It actually pretty much takes a year. It takes a very long time to come up with a budget, and it's not like Labour can be doing it themselves because although they're now working with civil servants on policy issues, they don't have access to the information the government do. So they're not allowed. So they don't actually have an accurate view of the economy other than what's published, which is, not enough to form a basis on. So as we're going to tell, let's just go through a few other things that came up that people may have little missed there. I will just point out that Hunt did he did say that this budget will stimulate growth, but he said that last year and we had no growth and now we're in recession. So, he's also created a little bit of a Brexit row. He's raised the threshold at which small businesses, don't have to pay VAT. But he's said apparently privately that he'd like to have done more, but it would mean, because of the Northern Ireland Protocol, having a different VAT regime in Britain and Northern Ireland, which you don't want to do. So he's basically created a Brexit row within his own party. The Sky News panel, so Sky News with YouGov collected together a group of different types of people who voted Conservative in 2019. So they got them to watch the budget. They weren't impressed. None of them were impressed. They all said this is a bit rubbish. So there we go. Right. So I can give them an accurate view of the economy. It's effed. Yeah, they may need a little bit more detail to do a budget. So what I'm saying is, when Labour do come in, they're still, I mean, there might be an emergency. If they came in May, there might be an emergency budget in autumn. But pretty much they're stuck with the budget until they can do another one, which takes a very, very long time. Oh, last comment here says, Chancellor's jibe at Rayner was out of order. 87 Tory MPs, including Hunt himself, are landlords. Rayner just sold her own house. Exactly. And Hunt himself failed to declare business interests on luxury flats that he has never lived in, that are purely for business, a few years ago. So, I mean, it was determined it was a genuine mistake, and maybe it was, but it doesn't matter. Nonetheless, it is absolutely hypocritical of the Tories to make something. But then it's election year. What do we expect? If that's the best they can come up with, then bring the election on. That's what I would say. But there we go. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Have a very good day. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe, of course. And until next time, I'll see you later.